Good evening to everybody. Welcome to our regulars, and if you're a first-timer with us this week, welcome to you. My name is Alan Friedman. I'm Vice President of the Australian Jewish Association, and I am the MC for this evening as usual. Also visible on your screens are David Adler, President of the AJA, as well as our guest for tonight, who those of you who have been here for a minute or two will have seen us chatting. And I'm very pleased to tell you that our guest tonight is the United Arab Emirates Ambassador to Australia, His Excellency Abdulla Al Subousi, and we will formally introduce him in a moment. And the topic, of course, will be all about the Abraham Accords. So why all the secrecy? Well, our Zoom sessions have been cyber attacked in the past, so we just took a cautious approach to ensure that this didn't happen again. The format will be a little bit different this week. The ambassador will make an opening statement, and then David will conduct a formal interview. Now, I'm sorry, we won't have any open mic questions from the audience this week, but you can post a question on the chat function, and if we have time, we will read them out if the topic hasn't yet been covered in the discussion. Now, I do need to point out that an ambassador to any country does not have a political role, so please don't put up questions about things such as Israeli politics, the Palestinian Authority, or the conflict with Hamas, as we can't accept them. So my suggestion is to preface any question that you particularly want to have asked on the chat group, preface it with the word question in capitals, and that way we'll spot it and they don't get lost in the chat. Okay, so prior to his current assignment to Australia in May 2019, Ambassador Al Subousi was the Consul General of the United Arab Emirates in Los Angeles, covering the West Coast, where he was the Director of the American and Pacific Affairs section. In a distinguished service record over the past 20 years, he has served 2 tours in the UAE Embassy in Washington, DC. Prior to that, His Excellency worked at the UAE Ministry of Foreign Affairs as Chief of the European Union Desk, where he was involved in the European Union Gulf Cooperation Council free trade negotiations. He has also been a member of the UAE official delegation to the United Nations, serving on several regional and international conferences. Ambassador Al Subousi graduated from the University of Minnesota with a double major in political science and international relations, with a minor in history. He also attended courses at the National Defence University and Brookings Institute. Your Excellency, welcome to the Australian Jewish Association. It's an honour to have you with us.
Thank you. Ambassador, we'd like to open with you saying something about your impression of the Abraham Accords, which our organisation, I should preface by saying, is delighted with. We think it's terrific progress, but we're very interested to hear your perspective.
Thank you so much. Well, distinguished guests, of the Australian Jewish Association, my sincere thanks for your invitation to speak to you about the peace between the UAE and Israel and the ongoing implementation of the Abraham Accords. The signing of the Abraham Accords between the UAE and Israel last year was one of the biggest milestones for the Middle East and recent history. I'm sure all of you are aware of what's going on in the region, so something positive like that was very welcomed, I think. And as we are celebrating the first anniversary of the Accords, I'm happy to report that the Accords are achieving their purpose and flourishing. This is evident by the many initiatives undertaken by both countries, ranging, from trade, tourism, aviation, healthcare, education, financial services, and more. For some of you who are not aware, the significance let me talk about my country first and say the UAE is the second largest economy in the Arab world. So when that's how significant this is, this treaty is. The UAE has become a pivotal player in solving complex issues in the Middle East through initiatives and diplomatic tools that address the root causes of conflict and disagreements. We are shifting from managing regional issues to solving them. And if you know, in our region, issues or problems seems to be very complex, that we tend to manage them instead of trying to solve them. So we're open to peace deal with Israel. We thought this is something natural to our approach to dealing with issues around us. We saw how important this paradigm, and I call it a paradigm shift, was, and we acknowledge the importance of dialogue as an integral part of our efforts in solving these complex regional issues. You know, the Middle East, as you may are well, I tried to be very positive in my talk, but you know about the challenges that face our region. Our belief that they require cooperation and well-thought approach. As such, the UAE has been carefully crafting policy measures that are, you know, at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. These measures will not only address the economic impact of the pandemic, which Australia is dealing with also, but also give the UAE a greater advantage in working with a like-minded regional power, such as Israel, thanks to the foundation for that cooperation, which are the Abraham Accords. The UAE and Israel have demonstrated our commitment to the Abraham Accord through extraordinary success in our bilateral diplomatic efforts over the last year. You know, 1 year on now, we have reached the stage where it is almost difficult to list all the agreements and MOUs signed since last August. I'm envious sometimes. There are, for example, the taxation treaty. We've been trying for 30 years to sign with Australia. And, you know, it just happened just like that within a year with Israel. We now have agreement covering nearly all major diplomatic and economic and cultural areas, all of which have a meaningful impact on bilateral cooperation. I would like to highlight some of the achievements that I find particularly noteworthy. First, we achieved a historical exchange of ambassadors representing our nations. The UAE will forever have the distinction of being the first Gulf state to have an embassy in Israeli soil, as well as the honor of hosting Israeli embassy in Abu Dhabi. Second of all, we have embarked upon a new era of economic integration with the signing of the agreement on economic and trade cooperation in Abu Dhabi and on last June 29th between UAE Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, His Highness Sheikh Abdulla bin Zayed Al Nahyan, and the Israeli Foreign Minister Yair Lapid during his visit to Abu Dhabi. Now, this agreement's significant. It commits us to developing economic relations, free trade of goods and services, and cooperation through trade fairs, knowledge exchange, cooperation and standardization, regulations, and research and development. And finally, we have committed to a draft of groundbreaking agreements on aviation, visa-exempt travel that have allowed our people to meet each other and learn about each other countries' and cultures, of course. I think the last point is particularly significant because it changes the story from one of government to one of people. It is people to people connections that will cement the place of the Abraham Accords in our societies. We have seen, and get this, we have seen the foundation of the UAE Israeli Business Council, and I just managed to create one a year ago. And under this Gulf Israeli the Gulf Israeli Women Forum, I hear that the council now has over 4,000 members, evenly split between Israel and the Emirates. With time, the economic impact of that will likely outpace our expectations for success. We have seen the first Emirati student, Mansour Al-Marzougi, enroll in an Israeli university, the first of many under new exchange programs between Israel and Israeli and Emirati universities. And just the other week, we have even seen the first birth of an Israeli baby in Dubai. Happens to be the child of the Israeli Consul General in Dubai. I am sure these milestones are only the beginning of the many firsts that our people will achieve. As we seek sustainable recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic, we will see an unprecedented increase in tourism and exchange. Before I conclude, allow me to emphasize that the Abraham Accords have not only given opportunities to UAE, Israel, and our region, but also our mutual allies and partners, including Australia. As I am fond of saying, the UAE is Australia's #1 trading partner in the Middle East, which is true, and is actively looking to expand its economic ties with Israel. So the Accords present an opportunity for Australia to increase its trade and investment opportunities in the Middle East through our two nations. At the grassroots level, we have already seen this with the Australia-UAE Business Council signing an MOU with the Australian-Israeli Chamber of Commerce in June of this year. So allow me to conclude, in just 1 year, the Abraham Accords have fundamentally changed the reality of our region by bringing us together to face our common issues. The Abraham Accords have demonstrated that building bridges of communication and cooperation are essential in order to solve bending issues and achieve a more secure and prosperous future for coming generations. We have to recognize that the Abraham Accords not only offered the UAE and Israel opportunities, but also our mutual allies such as Australia. We are committed to elevating our cooperation and adopting new approaches to find prominent solutions to ongoing regional issues. Again, I'm very thankful for your time and honored to be here with you. Thank you.
Ambassador, thank you very much for those comments. There are a few things about the Abraham Accords that have surprised us, and surprised generally on the pleasant side. And one of them you almost alluded to, which is the reaction of the people. The warmth from the Emiratis we've seen connecting with Israelis, playing music, exchanging messages, even some visits. Is that a fair reflection of the general mood in the UAE? How has it been received generally?
Well, David, thank you for that question. I think it comes as no surprise to us in the UAE. For decades, we have believed as a government and people in tolerance. The UAE is a multicultural country, and the Emirati people are welcoming and hospitable to everyone, no matter their faith. In 2019, we themed our year as the Year of Tolerance to celebrate that fact. And with many incorporating tolerance, we have a Ministry of Tolerance and a Minister of Tolerance. In fact, you know, it is our belief that what makes the Middle East as a whole region thrive is this idea of diversity, that, you know, not our region is not all Arabs, it's not all Muslims, there is Christians, there is Jews, everybody should be living together in harmony, and that's how we, at the end, we thrive. Excuse me. It's very hard to cough now. Yeah.
We don't have editing. No editing.
So, for example, I'll give you one example that I'm very excited about, which I've spoken a lot about, because that's how much excited I am. The Abrahamic Family House, which will open in hopefully in 2022. I think it's like 30% completion rate. And it will house a mosque, a synagogue, and a church next to each other. I don't know if I mentioned this, but we had astonishing over 200,000 Israeli tourists have already visited the UAE. And we can see, you know, we can see from their positive experience just how successful the actors are in on people-to-people level.
Ambassador, I need to ask you also whether there has been any opposition. You know, is there a radical element or anyone in the UAE, any significant opposition to the Abraham Accords?
There was, you know, there was a lot of overboard support. The relationship between the people and the government, that we trust our government decisions. We don't have, we never were in a war with Israel. Seems that the whole situation there is a little bit further than us. We have been very occupied in building our nation over the last 50 years. We sent a lot of our people to, you know, highly educated in Europe and US and Australia. So there is a foundation there. And I was, even for someone who hasn't lived in the UAE for, you know, off and on, but, you know, I was really happy to see how positive the people reacted to this.
Hasn't been significant opposition then. We haven't detected any, not in the UAE anyway.
Yeah,
which is wonderful. Now, some of the organisations in the UAE seem to be putting in a lot of effort to accommodate Jewish tourism, including Orthodox Jewish tourism. Can you make a comment about some of the preparations that have happened?
David, I just saw an advertisement just for a kosher, where is it? Yes, for a kosher restaurant in Dubai. It's called, I'm doing a plug for them. Hopefully when you get to
we'll come to that. That's on the list of questions.
Mule Hayam, which I heard offers this fantastic Israeli breakfast. But, you know, considering the global pandemic. People-to-people exchange is one of the most powerful resources that at our disposal as we seek to foster more stable and peaceful region for our people. You know, it's no secret that 11% of our GDP is from tourism. So under COVID-19, it was affected, of course, like all nations around the world. And, you know, by June this year, I think, like I said, I mentioned 200,000 Israelis had visited with all the restrictions. I've seen kosher restaurants, like I said. A number of hotels also provide that. You know, Jewish tourists will discover a multicultural society that embraces tolerance and diversity. There's also a vibrant practicing Jewish community in Dubai. And like I mentioned before, the first official synagogue at the Abrahamic family house in 2022 will open.
In addition to tourism, we're starting to see some information about trade between Israel and UAE. The last number I saw was that it had already reached about 600 million, and there is a forecast that it will soon reach 1 billion. Can you make a couple of comments about the nature of the trade? What sort of products are involved in the trade between UAE and Israel?
You know, I've seen figures that in the next 5 years, it will reach $4 billion US dollars. But, you know, since the announcement of the establishment of relations, we have seen countless businesses interested in establishing a presence in the other's country. Official Israeli reports indicate, like I said, that, you know, trade will reach, could reach up to $4 billion annually within the next 5 years. And we have seen in Abu Dhabi, for example, in Dubai, for example, the Dubai Commodity Center signed an agreement with the Israeli Diamond Exchange through the Dubai Diamond to foster collaboration between the two. And the world-leading diamond exchanges. This, along with other goods such as fruits, vegetables, it's very customary now to go through, grocery shops and see Israeli fruits and vegetables showcased with the Israeli flag. And all of this, you know, has been done in just under a year.
What is the UAE selling to Israel? What goes the other way?
I'm not really sure about that, but I can look into it. I'm not sure exactly.
Maybe it's the tourism. I mean, some of the images.
I mean, the tourism is, hopefully, you know, with the pandemic, we get more tourists than Egypt does per year. And we're very curious. We get a lot of Emirati tourists here in Australia before the pandemic. So I think the sky is the limit, of things to be exported. I know we do a lot of manufacturing, a lot of things that will benefit the Israeli market, I think.
Okay. We were fortunate to meet you at Parliament House on the day that you were signing the agreement in Australia. Can you say something else about what is the significance? I didn't think Australia would have any role at all in the Abraham Accords, and it came as another pleasant surprise to me that Australia was actually involved in one of the, I guess, subsidiary agreements to the Abraham Accords. What does that agreement mean?
I think, that was a great opportunity to showcase, the global impact of the Accords. From the beginning, we stressed that the Accords will will have a positive implications on not just the Middle East, but the world as a whole. The MOU signed, as you mentioned, between the Australia-UAE Business Council and the Australia-Israel Chamber of Commerce is significant in that it shows how business to business links between UAE, Israel, and Australia are a bridge to peace and stability. The MOU will work on promoting trade, commerce opportunities between the economies of the UAE, Israel, and Australia. We are delighted as well, to have the support of from the Australian government during the signing. You saw the Honorable Andrew G witnessing the ceremony. I am optimistic. This is only the start for a fruitful business-to-business relations between the three countries, and I've already seen it. Like I said, I'm at the beginning, before we went online, I was really very honored with the reception that I got from the Australian Jewish community and the welcomes. I already visited many synagogues, including Central Synagogue in Sydney, and before lockdown, and many Australian Jewish homes and business people, and there is great interest in not just from the questions, not just on the chat room, not just airlines and stopovers and stuff like that, but of business people actually wanting to play a part in this. And I think this is the right approach. I've always believed that trade plays a big role in uniting people. Governments can do so much. And when you have, I think, such a trust deficit, unknown. If you don't know people, if you haven't visited the place, it's very hard. But thank God, we have something, a framework now, and it's been executed wonderfully, and all these positive signs all over the place are just encouraging.
I need to ask you a couple of, I guess, harder and more pointed questions as well.
Yeah.
It's been said by some detractors that the Abraham Accords are really just about arms sales. It's about a military reaction. I mean, one of the factors is security. There is some security cooperation going on. So what is the correct perspective? And can you, I don't want you to get away without commenting on the Iranian threat
well,
as well.
That's, remember I said we want to hear positive things. But, since the signing of the Accords last year, we have been consistent in pointing out that the Abraham Accords are not related in any way to Iran. We view the Accords as a bridge between our two countries and peoples. One that focused on prosperity, peace, and stability. The UAE has long taken a position of de-escalation in the region so that everyone may thrive and prosper. And the Accords between the UAE and Israel are representative of that. And like I said, this is a great approach. If we can showcase the benefits of this agreement, more will follow. I think our region will be it will lead to more stability, something that we are all keen on, aren't we? You know, there is a lot of turbulent, you know, many things I can talk about that that happen, this cycle, you know, and your audience knows more than me how long this has been going on. We need a new approach. This is one way, one place where we can celebrate something positive. You know, I spoke about the year of tolerance. Every year we have we theme our years. You know, every year they have a theme. The 2019 was the year of tolerance. We had a visit by the Pope, and so many other things happened in 2019. Year of innovation. This year is actually very special because we celebrate the Golden Jubilee of the UAE.
Oh, wow.
And thank you. And to go from some of the least developed nations in the world to the second largest economy in our region, if we take away Turkey, I think, and many other, you know, that's why we have a space program where we have the first female Arab astronaut who will go soon into space. We're trying to inspire people through these initiatives. A probe to Mars. Empowering women is very important, and when you celebrate the last 50 years, at the same time we're celebrating the preparation for the next 50 years. We're thinking 50 years from now, how do we want to see our region? Not just our position in the world. Don't you think? So I think that's the mindset that that helped all this thinking forward.
Ambassador, there's just two things I'll leave you with before we see if Alan's got any questions on subjects that we haven't touched on. I want to foreshadow that when international travel opens up and normalizes again, the next AJA tour of Israel, we would like to have a group go via UAE, probably Dubai, and I'm hoping that your embassy might be able to assist with the arrangements when the time comes. I don't know when it is yet. It's not going to be in 2021. Maybe it can be in 2022.
I hope.
That's something we would like to do.
You have my support. I hope you do. And I have a few connections with the airlines. Maybe I can get a special discount or something.
We're particularly interested, you know, who we should meet, where we should go.
No, we'll arrange
the logistics, basically.
We'll arrange high-level meetings, and if I'm lucky, I'll be there also, and show you some Emirati hospitality.
Oh, wonderful! And that's the last thing I want to leave you with, and that is when interstate travel opens up in Australia, we would be honoured if you would consider an invitation to come to a Shabbat meal, Melbourne, Sydney, or both, which we will host with some of the people that are on the conversation here tonight, and so that they can meet you face to face. You can meet some of the community in Australia, or you've met some already, but some additional, and I hope you'd consider accepting a couple of dinner invitations sometime in the future.
I would love. That's very generous, and I would love to accept that. I love the bread. The fish, I'm not sure very. but the bed is beautiful, and
it's an acquired Okay, Alan, I don't know if you've got any
Yes.
other questions that you'd like to pass on over to you.
Thanks, David. Thank you to people who have put some questions up. What I'll do, I'll paraphrase them. It's just a bit too hard scrolling up and down to read them word for word, but I've made some notes. So, Mr. Ambassador, I guess one of the obvious questions is relating to other Gulf states, and the UAE has almost taken a leadership role in this particular area. The question is, has it changed any relations with the other Gulf states? And the one that everybody's thinking of that and would be interested in is Saudi Arabia. Can you make any comment about that, please?
I can't comment. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. But what I know for sure is that we have to make this work. We have to demonstrate the success of what we have already. And once we can showcase this, of course, people will want to join in. Don't you think? What's your perspective about?
I think everybody would love to join in.
Yeah.
Yes. Tell me, what about cultural exchanges? Has there been much happening? I guess COVID has stopped a lot of it. I imagine there are plans afoot. What can you tell us anything about what might be happening?
There is, as far as cultural exchanges, there is a lot of agreements. Like I said, they got in 1 year what I couldn't get in 40 years with Australia. So I'm very envious. But I think that there is there is no doubt in my mind, once we find post COVID-19, once the pandemic settles down, we know what's going on. Even here in Australia, I think we are still thinking about 70, 80, 90. We're fortunate in both the UAE and Israel that we've reached a very high percentage of vaccinated people, almost 80% now, and some of the highest in the world. So, but still, there is a lot of uncertainty when it comes to that. But I'm very sure. I already locked the Australian Jewish Association delegation, so that will happen hopefully, and we hope that many will happen. There is a lot of programs for it. Like I said, the football association signed an MOU to exchange programs and practice, best practice and stuff like that. I mean, it comes down to that. So many agreements. If I go into that, will facilitate these kind of cultural exchanges.
The reaction around the world, I think, has been fantastic. Is that the way that you've found things? I mean, from the moment that this was announced, I think it's been very positive from all around the world. How have you found it?
I found it amazing. First of all, everyone I know in the US, was up in cheers, their emails, phone calls, and stuff like that. And we dreamt about this. That's if I can summarize what I was told. Even with my Palestinian friends, with other Arabs, I haven't seen. Like I said, I'll tell you something. How you have the American dream, or maybe if you go to the Pacific small island states, they have the Australian. even people in New Zealand, they want to come to Australia to make it, get a better job or something. You know what I'm talking about? I think in our region, in the Arab countries, in the subcontinent, Pakistan, India, and other places, Bangladesh, and all these, there is the Emirati dream. They want to come to the UAE, make it big. We're an entrepreneurship place. If you see the billionaire list, it's a mosaic of people from different backgrounds. There is because they find in the UAE opportunity, they find they can make it there. Stability, something that we take for granted, which is normalcy. UAE is very normal as a state functioning. People in Iraq, for example, they were surveyed, youth, every year they're surveyed, which system you like to emulate? They say the UAE. So the UAE has thank God, have a positive, we wouldn't take a step that is not a positive one, that is not in the right direction. So I think in one way, we're fortunate to have this carry to this, to add more weight to the Abraham Accords.
Yes. I was just thinking back to when all this was first announced, and I guess I suppose I was surprised, and I imagine there was a lot of people were thinking, oh, can this work? Will it work? And yet it's worked very well. Has the diplomatic world been surprised by how smoothly and how well this whole program has progressed?
I don't want to jinx it, but it has worked very well. Like I mentioned, all these numbers, and we can say nice things, nice words about but when you see all these numbers, 4,000 members in just under a year, that's not easy. These are business people, companies, and so there is eagerness. There is a lot of hope into this. I think our region, unfortunately, has been faced with a lot of challenges. So we are in desperate, dire for hope and a better future for our children, our children's children. This seems a way out, I think, because before the Abraham Accord, nothing happened. I don't think. Can you? Maybe you can. You guys can enlighten me. Since '93, I think. And there was a setback after setback after setback. So when the Abraham Accords came, I think they brought a fresh breath of fresh air into maybe a little bit, of hope. So there is a lot at stake in this. But I'm very sure that it's in capable hands. I was very delighted with the with the new government approach in Israel, and things are happening. And our ambassador in Tel Aviv is very active. If I don't know if anybody follows him in his Twitter account, you should definitely do that. And he's talking to all different people, and just I can say the same thing about Israeli ambassador. He just got there, and a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of hope for a better future.
Yes, yes. Now we're going to have to finish because the ambassador is limited in his time. Just one before I hand back to David. It sounds like a fascinating place to visit, and I mean, hopefully we'll be able to get there one day. How hot does it get there in summer, Ambassador?
It's very hot. Very hot in the summer, but everything that you'd like to see, including the Abrahamic house, you know,
yes.
in the synagogue there, every air conditioned. The best time, I have the best job, because one of the reasons I took this job is because during our summer, it's winter here. And so I'm here always during the winter, your Australian winter.
Yes.
And during your summer, I'm over there enjoying the winter there. And I hope you join me.
Yes, we'd love to. Look, it's been wonderful chatting to you, and I thank you very much for your time. It's been an honour for us. David, I'll just hand back to you because we need to let the ambassador go.
Certainly. Well, firstly, Ambassador, thank you so much for your time. I hope this is the beginning of a good working relationship, and we will get to the UAE, and you've got the dinner invitations for in Australia when we can do that. But there's one comment that really needs to be made. There had to be a first in the Abraham Accords, and it was the UAE that was the first. Now that needs some vision, it needs some courage, and it is a game changer. And I think the UAE deserves enormous credit internationally for having taken the first step. A few others have followed, but it will never be lost that the UAE is first.
Thank you.
And the final thing I need to do, as I do every week, is to foreshadow what's coming up next. And I just need to get the screen share going in order to do that. Here we are. Right.
Just while you're doing that, David, I just want to thank, apart from thanking the ambassador, I want to thank Majid, who's one of his assistants in the embassy. And it's just been so easy to organise tonight, and I want to thank you all for doing that.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'll get going. I look forward to meeting each and every one of you personally.
Okay, that's a deal.
That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Ambassador.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Next week we have quite a personality. Tuvia Tenenbaum is a comedian, personality, playwright, author, political commentator. He's published quite a number of books. His latest one is called Taming of the Jew, which is about his adventures in the UK, tracking down anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. It's become Israel's top-selling ebook, and in tracking down anti-Semitism, he even came across this character. No more needs to be said. I'm told Alan will ask about this particular meeting at our event next week. And finally, please, if you are not yet on our email list, go to jewishassociation.org.au and you can subscribe for free. Follow our news and views on the Facebook page, and we do need support. So if you're not yet a member or haven't contributed, there's also a facility to do that on the website. Back to you, Alan, for final goodbye.
Okay, thanks, David. Thanks to everybody for joining us. We apologies again for being a little secretive, but we do need to make sure we don't get attacked. Okay, so until next week, it'll be very interesting. That picture with Jeremy Corbyn and Tuvia Tenenbaum, it does look a little bit as if they're great mates, but there's a bit more behind the story to that, so we'll explore that next week. So we look forward to having you join us then, but until then, it's good evening from me and good night to you all. Bye for now.